Hello, everybody, and welcome to this class on writing professional emails, email etiquette essentials. My name is Swapnil Kamat. I'm the CEO of Work Better Training. I'm sure you're tired of hearing that by now if you're attending the classes. And with me, we have an expert on soft skills content and especially an expert in email writing. Arunima is one of the best email writers I know, and she's put this content together with a lot of love, intelligence, and you guys are going to love it. Hi, Arunima.
Hi.
Okay, cool. You know what Arunima's job is? So Arunima is going to go
Yeah.
on screen and otherwise mute, but Arunima keep coming in as and when I am goofing up or when I miss out on something or when you think a relevant question comes in. Okay.
Will do.
Now, this is a very important topic, as all topics of communication are, but let's head right into this topic. Okay. So, what is email etiquette to start with? And if in terms of the communication coaching program, we have the bunch of stuff that we did right at the start, which was around the communication fundamentals, McKenzie pyramid model, precision model of communication. These three topics are stuff that applies both to your verbal communication and to your written communication. So it's not something that just applies to one and doesn't apply to the other. The classes that y'all have probably done after that, which is body language and how to speak impactfully, of course, it's just about verbal communication. If you've done a session on listening skills, that's of course listening and incoming information. That is, of course, part of your verbal communication. But the first three classes, like I mentioned, will apply in both these things. Now, around your writing skills in specific and emails in specific, we have two classes. One is on email etiquette, and then there's another class on how to write better. But all of y'all must keep in mind that the principles that are around communication fundamentals, precision model, and McKenzie are applied in writing as well. Okay, but let's get to email etiquette in specific. So, email etiquette refers to the guidelines one should use when writing or answering emails. Email etiquette is about respect and common sense. Professionalism and etiquette is not only important in face to face interactions, but also in emails, right? So, for a want of a better word, email etiquette is nothing but email manners, and just certain principles of how to put emails together, that are very, very important, because so much of our communication in today's day and age happens in writing besides verbal communication. And that's why this thing is important. The other thing when it comes to emails is, verbally, when while communicating with a person, if you make a mistake, often there is no proof of it. But if you're not very good at writing emails, and especially not very good at email etiquette, you will make certain mistakes, and there will be written proof of your stupidity, and sometimes of a person being not professional in a way, right? And that's not a result that you would desire as somebody that's operating in the professional world, right? So this is what broadly email etiquette is. Now, what is the importance of email etiquette? Conveys a strong professional image if you write your emails well, makes communication efficient, and helps the recipient understand your message properly. I think point number two is something which is extremely important, right? If you're good at email etiquette, you're making it easy for the person receiving the email, you're making it easy for him to understand the message. And that plays a very important part if you're a good communicator, and it shows the effort that you take in putting your emails together, and learning certain etiquette that is required. Also shows your respect towards the recipient and reader, right? Because if you're not going to put your emails well together, it doesn't show professionalism. It also doesn't show that you respect the party on the other side, right? So it has this huge importance, in business communication, right? And your email says a lot about your work ethic, your commitment towards work, and your attention to detail, right? All of this comes out through it. So very important topic, as all the other topics are as well. Right now, we've come up with a model which is just going to help you remember a lot of things that you'd learn here, which is called the SME model, which is breaking your email etiquette into three parts: the start and beginning of an email, The second is the middle or the email body. What are the guidelines to follow in the email body? And the third one is how to end your email, right? So this is the three parts of it. Let's dive right in to the first one, which is the start. Okay. Now, let's move to the first question, which is around addressing your email. Okay, and how to use CC and BCC. A lot of y'all may know this already, but for those of y'all who don't, two is meant for the main recipient of your email. Here include those who are required to take action in response to the email, right? So it's not like you put each and every person in the two section. It's only who the message is directed to in specific, who requires an action to be taken. Use CC to keep others in the loop. The people you keep in CC are not expected to take any action or reply to the message, right? So if you're expecting a reply, not to be kept in CC. And BCC is used when you want to send an email to multiple people, but you do not want any of them to know about each other, right? So you may want to keep, say, a lot of times people keep their boss's boss or somebody really senior. They want to keep them in the loop, but they don't want to disclose their email IDs or that they're in the loop to say a customer or to some other party. And that's the time when you use BCC. So these are the two things that we use the most. And please don't confuse yourself between these two, right? It's very important to know when to use two, CCC and BCC. Okay, now the next part is the subject line. Okay, what are you supposed to do? Very, very important. Okay, in a lot of cases where people get hundreds of emails a day, a lot of us don't get few emails. I'm one of those people. I don't get too many emails, but a lot of people get tons of emails. And if you don't know how to craft a good subject line, your email is not going to be read very often in the 100 emails that somebody else gets. And that's why it becomes all the more important for you to know how to craft your subject line in an appropriate way, right? And that's something that we're going to try to teach you. Now, these are just some examples of it. Now, this is a bad example of how to craft a subject line where you just say test and nothing else, and where the subject that you're talking about is totally different, right? But you just put an irrelevant and inappropriate subject line. This is something which is a subject line which is a lot more appropriate, and the next slide will really tell you why it's appropriate, right? So this in a way is giving a lot of specific details to the other person of what that email is about, right? So we learn, which is one of the brands of Work Better, you have that in it. You have you're mentioning the name of the client. You're mentioning what the project is. Okay, sales process project. You're mentioning, so you're trying to make this as kind of specific as possible. And here is just to tell you why this is a good email email subject that we learn Imami this. So you're making clearly informs the recipient which client is it's going to, highlights which project is being discussed, as there are multiple projects that are there, and clearly gives a clear understanding of what the email is about, and even goes to the extent of telling them what action you want, right? So details to be shared with the client. So this is an example of a really good subject that is crafted for it, right? So how to write subject lines? The subject line should clearly communicate what the email is about. You need to try to keep it, all principles of business writing even apply to the subject, where you keep it specific, concise, and useful. In a way, use keywords that will help the recipient search and filter easily. So that's really helping them. And as far as possible, both in your subject line and in the rest of your email, try to avoid using caps lock, right? So in a way, a good way to put a subject is, how do I put a subject where I put that one line, or that it could be like broken up into different parts like the previous one was, but that subject itself should give you a total understanding of what the email is about, right? That's how you need to put a subject line. And here, when I'm teaching you about a lot of these things, I'm not talking about certain marketing emails that you may send, right? Or mass mailers that are often sent across to people, and the tactics and techniques that you may use in those marketing emails that are being sent could be very different. Here I'm talking about most of of your business emails, that's what it needs to follow. The subject line needs to give you a full understanding of what that email is about, right? Arunima is on screen, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure she has a question.
I actually have a point to add.
Yes.
Though you mentioned that we are not talking about marketing emails, it's
Yes.
important to know why the subject line matters, because usually when you're in an office environment, you tend
Hmm.
to open all emails, no matter what
Correct.
the subject line is.
Correct.
So even if it's a poorly written subject line, I will open the email because I know it's work related. But
Correct.
if you're, let's say, an entrepreneur, or you're
Yeah.
sending out emails to get someone's attention,
Correct.
there the person
Yeah.
will determine whether they want to open your email or not, perhaps just by the subject line. So it really
Absolutely.
matters in those situations as well.
I think you made this point brilliantly, Arunima. And also, Arunima, truth be told, in situations like, I don't know how many emails you receive in a day, but a
Right.
lot of people that I have trained in the past on this subject say that I said 100. They say, listen, sometimes we get 300 emails a day, right?
Right.
And that's just way too many emails to wade through. And if you want somebody's urgent attention, if you write the subject line properly in those
Correct.
100, sometimes 200, 300 emails that people get, your email will be read even then. But what you're
Correct.
saying is absolutely right. When you are emailing, especially even in as a salesperson in an organization, if you have to like reach out to somebody outside of your ecosystem, and of course the subject line will play a very important part, because they will
Right.
kind of determine whether to open it or not based on that. Yeah.
Right. No, and you are correct, because even if you receive 100 emails, some of them
Yeah.
would be FYI versus something that needs to be
Yeah.
actioned. So again,
Yeah.
if that's mentioned in the subject line, I know which one to open first to
Correct.
start actioning that one first. You make a very quick decision
Correct.
within milliseconds, almost, just depending on the subject line, and that's the importance and the criticality of it.
Correct, absolutely. So just one more kind of thing in the subject line is when Arunima, you can come back on screen, because we it will be good to have a
Yes.
discussion with you on this. So when somebody emails me, I would often reply to that email. So the subject line would then reflect saying RE, right? Reply to it.
Correct.
And then very often you could be writing to that same person about a subject which is entirely different or is changed. During that
Right.
time, although you may want the entire stream that is there earlier, right? The email exchanges that are there earlier, if the subject of your discussion with that person changes, as far as possible, try to change the subject line as well. So please don't keep doing reply to each other on a
Correct.
subject line that has now become irrelevant to you. Okay, because
Correct.
then again, searching that thing for you and the other person will become very, very difficult. So if
Right.
the subject is the same, you all can keep just replying to each other with that same subject. But as soon as the subject changes, take the effort to actually go and change the subject, because that is something which is going to be important, and that's again a part of email etiquette when it comes to
Correct.
the subject, right? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something I practice.
Yeah.
So
Great. But if I had to kind of try to explain this, Arunima, in one line, I think the best way to explain it is to say that your subject line needs to be written in a way where the person knows exactly what your email is about, right?
correct.
And if you can give them that through the email, that's a well-crafted email. Although all these four rules that have been mentioned on this slide also hold true in a
Right.
way. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, this is a good example again of a good subject where you're telling your whoever boss or whoever you're writing to as to exactly what the email is about. You're talking about leave intimation. You're also giving the dates on which you're going to be on leave. So it's specific, it's concise, and it's useful for the other person. Again, the same thing here. You're talking Work Better Club, which is one of our products, Managing Up Masterclass, which is again related to that, and follow up for the video recording, right? So the it's very clear again in this case what the email is about. Yes, Arunima.
Here I had a question.
Yes.
So often when you're communicating internally,
Yes.
there are certain words or certain, let's say, for example, managing up
Yeah.
is a class that we often conduct at Work Better. So usually
Yes.
when I send out emails to my internal stakeholders, I
Yeah.
wouldn't put the word master class or
Yeah.
session or
Yeah.
workshop, because they
Yeah.
know what that word means.
Yeah.
So is there sort of a rule or guideline around when you need to be ultra specific versus when you don't need to add too many details. And if we take it back to the lecture that we had on specific communication, we
Yeah.
had talked about this a little bit over there.
Correct. But also in that lecture, if you remember, Arunima, we had spoken about when to use abbreviations, short forms, and when not to
Right.
use abbreviation short forms, right? So
Correct.
if you are writing to a certain colleague that you and that person know what managing up is, maybe you don't
Hmm.
need to write masterclass after that, right?
Hmm.
Because it's just
Hmm.
you and that person. However, if you're going to write to somebody that's new in your company that may not
Hmm.
know that, right? Could be part of the same department but may not necessarily, could be new to the company and may
Right.
not know that this is one of our products. That's when you could get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So as far
Hmm.
as possible, when you're communicating with people, the principle of making it specific, simple, always helps, and concise, irrespective of who
Correct.
you're writing to. But again, we are going to send thousands of emails in our lifetime in different situations to different people. So you can't have one rule that applies to all. In the end, you have to use a little bit of your common sense, right? So yeah,
Correct.
if you're just writing to a colleague that is you're sure knows what managing up is about, maybe you can avoid it. But as far as
Hmm.
possible, keep the principle in mind.
Got it.
Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah, it does.
Mm, yeah, cool. Thank you, Arunima. Okay. Now, a pro tip for subject lines: if your email is either urgent or for information only, indicate this in the subject line, right? So this, again, she's given two examples of how you can do it. If something is urgent, please put the words urgent here in big and bold. But if this is a trick that you're going to use very often, where each one of your emails is going to be urgent, it's going to lose its relevant and important, and then nobody's going to take that word urgent really seriously. If it's for your information also, please mention that on the slide, because that again becomes very important for people to know. This means that it will be read immediately if necessarily, and or be put aside for later without your recipient having to worry about it, right? So again, you're making it easy for the receiver of the email to know what action to take around the email that you send. Okay. Yeah, so this was a little bit about what you do for your subject lines. Now, lots of confusion here around this issue about salutations and greetings on emails. So let's kind of understand that. When you're writing really formal emails, so emails to important clients, high stake stakeholders, or person in a position of respect, and what we mean is really senior people within an organization, or people that you don't know well, that you don't have a existing rapport with, or somebody that you deem as high stake, at that point of time, the way to go about it is either write, if it's somebody really high stakes that you don't know, really senior, the way to go about it is to write, you write, "Dear Mr. Kamat," right? That's my name, Swapnil Kamat. So, "Dear Mr. Kamat" is what you write, and then you continue your email. If it's formal, but it's somebody who's probably not that serious, you could also say, "Dear Swapnil," right? Okay, that could be your email. But what you're not supposed to do when you're writing is, these are the two ticks, this is what you do. What you're not supposed to do is, you don't write, "Dear Mr. Swapnil," right? So that's the kind of wrong way of doing it, right? So this is something that you don't do. You write either "Dear Mr. Kamath" or "Dear Swapnil" is what you do. Ideally, you don't even write "Dear Mr. Swapnil Kamath," right? It's "Dear last name" or "Dear first name." Okay. However, since email has become such a prominent part of our lives, and we end up sending so many emails, especially to our colleagues or even clients that you have a good rapport with, you don't always need to go with something which is as formal as "Dear Mr. Swapnil," right? You can also just say, "Hello, Swapnil," if it's a slightly more informal or semi-formal relationship that you'd have, or "Hi, Swapnil," or you can even use that language. So that's not frowned upon anymore in the context of business. If I'd done this class with you probably 10, 15 years back, there was still a lot of formality in email. So at that point of time, people still expected you to probably use "Dear Mr. Kamat," but today email has become such a frequent exchange between people that if you use something like "Hi, hello," that works. There's no problem there. Okay. Now, greetings and opening statements, right? So most emails should begin on a polite, respectful, and encouraging note. And Arunima and myself were having a discussion on this offline, and we were just saying that all interactions in business and otherwise should always start on a positive note, right? Because more often than not, even if you have to discuss a really tough issue with somebody, or you need to give really harsh feedback or critical feedback to someone, you're not personally attacking that person, or you shouldn't personally attack that person, right? So still you start that interaction that you have on a positive note, and then you could get on to discussing really tough things. The same thing is more or less true in the context of writing emails. So, as far as possible, irrespective of what the content of the email is, always try to start the email on a positive note. So, in a way, it shows the person that even if you're discussing something tough, it's not because you are in a bad mood that you're being harsh, right? You still have the courtesy, the level-headedness, you're being cool about it, and you're always starting respectfully. And these are some of the ways in which you can start your email that would kind of set a positive tone to it, where you can say, hope this email finds you well. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. I hope you're having a great week. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for getting in touch. It was a pleasure speaking to you. So this is just a good, polite, nice way, positive way of starting it. Um, of course, this is not going to be application if you and somebody is going to be exchanging probably 10 emails back to back during the day on a certain thing. You don't need to start each one of your emails with this, right? But if you're writing to a person, once every 3 days also, right? The first email can always start with these niceties which are there. Okay, now we come to the second part of the email, which is the middle portion, right, of what we're supposed to do. So let's discuss the topic of tone of emails that is there. Okay, now while talking, a person can understand the emotions based on your tone of voice, right? So we discussed this in our earlier class where we said tone of voice is nothing but emotions or feelings expressed through words. That's what tone of voice means. Although there is no speaking voice in emails, there is always a tone, right? We determine what the tone is of the person based on how the email is constructed. Just because you write in a certain way doesn't mean that it's received in the same way by the person on the other side. And when we read an email, we attempt to read the intention behind it and the tone of the words as well. That's what we tend to do as receivers of email. So very simply put, um, tone of voice is both something which is applicable in your verbal communication or your spoken word, but also there's a certain tone to the emails that you would write. So therefore, what do you do to ensure that you're on the right footing as far as that is concerned, right? So how to reflect the right tone in emails? So number one, the words that you use, right, in the email determine the tone. So use courtesy words or use polite words in your email, like please, thank you, kindly, request you to, because if you don't use these polite words or these courtesy words, people can miss interpret it as you being harsh to them, right? Or you being curt to them. Often use question marks and exclamation marks to reflect the tone behind the message, right? So especially an exclamation mark is something that will help the person probably know that you're excited about something, right? That's what it does. And a question mark often reflects, yeah, the person understand that it's a question in a way, right? So that's how they understand the tone. Yes, Arunima.
No, a good example of, let's say, the exclamation point, if you
Mm.
take a statement as simple as hope you're having a good day,
Yeah.
right? When you read it, if it
Yeah.
just ends with a full stop, you read it as, okay, hope you're having a good day. It almost
Yeah.
seems like a very formal
Mhm.
way of starting the email versus an exclamation point, such
Yeah.
a small difference, but you automatically read it as, oh, hope you're having a good day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the importance of that one little change in the punctuation. It automatically shows that the email is much brighter. It
Correct.
has a more cheerful tone of
Correct.
voice.
Correct. How would you use in your world? How would you say use question marks? If you had to explain that to our participants, how would you explain that?
I think the point is, again, it's a question mark very clearly implies that I'm asking you a question, and it's like following proper grammar, right? So if
Yeah.
your sentence not formed correctly, and if you've not put a question mark in the end, or even a full stop, it's a poorly drafted email.
Got
So
it.
the question mark comes from that point to show that your email is drafted well. You've paid attention to the detail, and
Got it.
when the reader reads it again, a sentence again, how you doing versus how you doing,
Yeah,
they say the same thing, but there is a
a
different phrases and there's
difference.
a question mark that you add in. Right.
Absolutely.
So, but more
Absolutely.
importantly, I think, like you said, the focus is on things like an explanation, exclamation point versus a full stop.
Yeah, cool.
That's how you can show your tonality.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. The third point here was caps lock. Do not use capital letters in your email. This is the equivalent, digital equivalent of yelling at somebody, right? So it just shows a person that you're speaking in a very angry or a furious kind of tone of voice. And there are only a few places that you should use kind of caps lock when you absolutely need to bring probably somebody's attention to it. But as far as possible, avoid using total caps lock. Yes, Arunima.
You said it already, but in
Yes.
one of the examples that we just showed, where in your subject line you want to indicate that this is urgent.
Yeah.
So we have said that avoid using caps lock
Yeah.
as much as possible. But like you said, there's certain situations where I really need you to action something or want you to
Correct.
pay, want to draw your attention to it. So I have put urgent in caps lock.
Correct. That makes sense.
Yeah, so it was important to
Yeah.
cover that.
Cool. Yes. Thank you, Arunima. That's a point well covered. Okay. So determine the tone of this email. Okay. So pause the video here. You can read this very quickly. Okay. I hope you've paused it. I hope you read this email. Now let's look at the same thing with in a polite tone of voice, right? And this email, you can pause it again and read it, but this email will uh, be is so much better, right? So there'll be no misinterpretation from the other side that whether the person is upset, not in a good mood, is being harsh. No such misinterpretation as it could have happened in the previous email that you read. And again, it's all because of this. You're starting on this polite tone. Hope you're having a good day. You're using a please here. You're saying request here. Kindly let me know. So let do feel free to reach out if you need clarification. So you're peppering your email with all the courtesy words, all the niceties that are required, that will avoid all kinds of misunderstandings that the person could have on the other end, right? Now, font type and size. What are you supposed to do there? Arunima, do you want to share something on the
Swapnil,
previous
I have a
one?
question.
Yes.
No, I have a question.
Yes. Tell me.
Could it be in some occasions
Yeah.
if you use niceties and you pepper
Yes.
your email with too many of these words,
Yeah.
uh, especially if you're sending out, let's say, a stinker email, as they're called, could
Yeah.
it be misinterpreted that you're kind of sort of butter the person up if you want a favor, if you use a lot of these niceties? So is there a possibility of that happening over email if you are not careful with your tone? Or you use too much of the politeness?
Correct. So as a general principle of life, if you do anything a little too much, it's not good, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. Salt is good, but if you put too much of salt in food, it's not going to be good, so on and so forth, right? So the same thing generally applies to email writing as well. If you just put all niceties, every word is a nicety or a courtesy word, your email becomes much longer, and also it could be misconstrued to flattery and stuff like that, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is that
Mhm.
make this your general style of writing and being even in person, right? Whether you're in person speaking to somebody or as an email, you develop the reputation of being somebody that's polite, of somebody that is respectful, and
Mhm.
where required, we're going to do a topic on assertive communication, and we keep talking about that. What is assertive communication? It's a combination of you being polite and firm in a way, right? And the combination of polite and firm is very nice. I think the same thing applies for the email communication, right? Even if
Mhm.
you have a slightly more firm message to get across to somebody, you can always balance it off with certain politeness which can come through these words that are putting across, because you don't want to be harsh for the sake of being harsh. You don't want to tilt over towards being too aggressive towards somebody, right? And then more often than not,
Correct.
the entire point of the email could get lost. So you're
Mhm.
right when you say if you overdo it, it'll be a problem. But in my experience, I haven't seen too many people overdoing it, right?
Mhm.
And to your firm message, I think the firm message can be balanced very well with the politeness that will make it an assertive message going out to someone,
Got it. Yeah.
right? I think that's an excellent question, Arunima.
Thank you.
Thank you. Font types and size. Okay, so let's look at what the logic is here towards choosing the right font. Select a font that's clean, uncluttered, easy to read. Avoid fancy fonts that look like handwriting fonts and novelty fonts such as Comic Sans. These fonts are considered unprofessional, unreadable, or sometimes both. Choose universally available fonts only. Your recipient's email will display the selected font style only if it is compatible on their end, right? So this is again a very important point. And if you have a company font or email template, follow it for your official email. So four very simple points here in terms of how to go about choosing the right font. Um, Now, fonts to avoid. We've already mentioned this, but Comic Sans is a font that is considered in a way childish or childlike. So that's something that you want to avoid. You want to avoid fonts which are very difficult to read in email. So if you see, all of these are very difficult fonts to read. These fonts are best used while you're probably designing an invitation to a wedding or something like that, but not in your business emails. These are fonts that you can totally avoid. The best fonts to use if you don't have a company recommended font or a company font, these are some of the best fonts you can use that are both universally acceptable, universally available in everybody's email box and easy for you to read, which is Georgia, Verdana, Times New Roman, I don't know how to pronounce this, and Arial, right? So these are the five ones which are the best fonts to use for optimum readability. Now, selecting your font size, logic again is very simple. Make your font large enough so that the readers don't have to squint or like really go like that to read the message, but not so large that the reader has to scroll long, scroll quite a bit to finish the entire email. Depending on how long your text is, 10-point or 12-point font size is often the optimal size to send an email. The recipient does have an option to change the font size in their version of the email, but your email shouldn't force them to do that, right? So just keep in mind 10 to 12 points is the optimal for you to do it, and just try to stick to that as far as possible in your emails. Okay, now this is a example of an email, and we'll see what are all the things that have gone wrong here. Now here, do not use multiple fonts in, sorry, do not use multiple font sizes, font style, sizes, and colors in one email, right? So if you look at this particular word is one font, the rest of it is different. Here, all of a sudden, the font has become big because this person has probably copy pasted this thing somewhere. And here again, you're using a totally different color in the email, and you're also using, I think the font is the same or the font is different. I can't even tell. This is so badly done, right? So this is a very bad example of how you put an email, and it looks extremely shoddy and extremely unprofessional for somebody to write an email like this, right? And just I can't tell you. I think Arunima mentioned the context very well when she started, right? So she said that in a lot of cases, when you're working possibly for a larger company, even if you write a terrible subject line or a terrible email, possibly somebody else will open it because they have a predetermined TAT or turnaround time where they have to reply to certain emails. But if you're a freelancer, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're writing to an outside stakeholder, even if you work for a large company, they will look at an email like this, which is so badly written, where the fonts are different, colors are different, sizes are different, and just based on this, literally choose not to reply to you, because they'll be like, oh, this person doesn't seem like they have their act together. This person doesn't seem like they're a professional. And this happens, I'm sure you experienced it, but this happens to me like almost 100% of times. When an email comes like this, even if the contents of that email are extremely good, I'm not going to reply to that person because it's really reflecting their personality in a way. It's really reflecting the fact that they don't take, they don't have an eye for detail, they don't take their work seriously. Just so much of a reflection if an email came to me that looked like this, right? Like the example that we're showing on screen. Yes, Arunima.
I think internally as well, like I said, people will reply because they have to, but
Yeah.
you'll still end up forming an impression about the other person. So if I were to
Mhm.
receive an email like this, although I would have to reply to it and I will get the job
Yeah.
done,
Yeah.
I have formed an impression about the sender of this email
Mm,
thing that they clearly don't pay attention to detail, and they,
yeah.
that I'm not too sure how professional this person is.
Yeah.
So that would be the difference. So if you're an entrepreneur, it can be the sort of a
Deal
almost a
breaker.
deal
Yeah.
breaker for you.
Yeah.
Internally, it's more that a person forms a poor impression
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah,
you as
yeah.
a
Can
professional.
you imagine, like especially for a lot of the freelancers, or if somebody aspires to be an entrepreneur and you're writing an email to a potential investor, right, or
Correct.
a potential customer, which can be deal breaker for you, right? You read this and they'll be like, oh, who is this writing this email?
Correct.
Didn't even take the effort to do this. And in a way, communication, Arunima, is become everybody is so accessible in the world today through
Mhm.
written communication, if you think of it, right?
Yes.
Because you can, even on forums like LinkedIn or otherwise, it's easy for you to find a contact to somebody. It's easy for you to find their email ID. It may not be that easy to get in touch with them over the phone, but you can definitely,
Correct.
figure out their email ID, LinkedIn connection, and at least find a way to write to them for sure.
Yes.
You can find that way to write to them, and that one shot often that you have of writing to them, if you're not going to have the right subject line, if you're not going to have the right font, if you're not going to have the right font size, if you're going to do all this rubbish, that's
Correct.
not going to work. And that's why I'm so happy you all are all here as far as the coaching program is concerned on communication, right? Because you know that these things are serious, you know they're important, and you want to get better at it. Okay,
And
thank you.
in fact, right, like you said, more people are accessible through writing, and your
Yeah,
errors are blatantly more visible in writing.
yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
kind of, you need to be really careful, because we
Yeah,
use this more than talking and
yeah,
verbal, at least when
yeah,
you're trying to reach a person for the first time,
yeah,
and your errors are right there in black and white.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all the more important.
Absolutely. One of the things, very, now that you mentioned this, in the previous slide, I forgot to mention it, but we were talking about tone of the email. And I think I've mentioned this in the earlier class that the real people took to messaging after WhatsApp came in a big, big way. And actually, before WhatsApp, even when that, I think BBM, right, that
Mhm.
messenger came on BlackBerry, if you remember,
Correct.
much more than SMS is because of one phenomena, which was the smileys
Emojis.
that came, emojis or smileys, right? That came with them, because that became such a important way of communicating the tone of what you are writing,
Correct.
which tends to happen when you speak to people, right? So that the reason why it's become so widely popular across people, across people, across geographies and across all age groups, is because of this phenomena. Is you can add a big smile and the person knows what your
Correct.
emotion is when you're writing. You can have a laughing emoji, and then okay, you find that funny, so on and so forth, right?
Correct.
And that became the start of almost a revolution, just your ability to determine the tone in which you're writing to somebody, right?
Correct.
Unfortunately, when it comes to most business mails, we can't add emojis. Although now, if you use something like Gmail, they give you, I think, the feature of adding emojis to even the
Mhm.
emails. But in most kind of business emails, that is still frowned upon. I'm sure if people watch this lecture 10 years down the line, it'll be fairly different. But at least as of today, in 2020, it's fairly frowned upon, right? Using those things in your email. Since we're talking about writing here, even if you're WhatsApping your WhatsApping people, especially important stakeholders in a business setting, as far as possible, try to keep your language as formal as possible. Don't try to use short forms there. Write full sentences when you're talking to important clients, stakeholders. Of course, most of these rules may not be applicable when you're messaging a colleague from office that you're really close to, and you'll keep interacting all the time over a messenger service. So then if you use a short form or use slightly colloquial language there, it's fine. But even if you're using any of the messenger services with important customers, be clear that you're still using full forms, right? And still formal
Correct.
language even through that. Mm.
I think it is a good practice to generally use full words in that language, because often what happens is we become so used to writing, following that language, it spills over into your emails as well. And I've seen that
Yeah,
happen,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you replace certain words with shorter words and shorter.
yeah,
I I don't use it personally, but yeah, it again, poor impressions. I think this overall when you're communicating, because more often than not, we're always communicating with business stakeholders.
You're right.
So
You're right. You're right.
yeah,
Um,
always
if you
kind of
think
be
of it, if you think of it, we're writing so much more, and most people don't
mm,
realize that we're writing so much more because we're writing on WhatsApp and writing on these
correct,
forums that we wouldn't
correct.
earlier do. And you're right when you say it, right? That people get so used to doing that that it sometimes spills over into their email, and especially in formal settings, and it's not a very good thing to. It's not considered professional, at least in 2020, right?
Right.
As with we're talking about etiquette and manners, and etiquette and manners in a way they change with time, right? So yeah, as of 2020, this is what's true. Arunima, let's see how things
I
pan out.
have
Yeah, go on.
another question.
Yes,
We are talking about things being too casual if you don't follow etiquette.
yes.
But is there a possibility that you can come off as too stuffy if you're really, I don't know if that's something that reflects in your writing and in etiquette, in written etiquette at least?
You would rather err on the side of being too formal than being too informal,
Mm,
right? You would
right.
rather be on that side than on this side. Yeah, that's all that I would say. And with all communication, if you remember class number 1, we said all communication is about the other person, it's never about you, right? So
Correct.
you need to really think about who is the person or people that you're writing
Hmm.
to, before determining how you go about writing it, right? So tomorrow, if
Right.
you're if you make your emails too stiff with a person that you are communicating with all the time, that would be rather weird or strange for that
Right.
person, that we just sit next to each other, and why you being so formal all of a sudden, when
Hmm.
this is an email only addressed to me, right? So in that situation, what you're saying is right, but as a general rule, you'd rather err on the side of being slightly more formal in business situations than on the side of being too informal with
Yeah.
them. Hmm?
Makes sense.
Okay, good. Now let's look at the logic behind spacing, highlighting, and numbering or bulleting, right? Line spacing is the space between each line or paragraph. Using spaces properly makes your email message more readable and easier for readers to absorb text, right? This is the most important thing to understand. Why do you need to have spacing? Because if you're going to get so many emails, and if your emails is not going to have appropriate spacing, the readers are not going to enjoy reading it, and it's going to be difficult for them to absorb text. Add a line of space after the greeting, a line after each paragraph, and lines before and after your signature, right? So that's the kind of the big logic behind what you do in spacing, right? There needs to be spacing largely between paragraphs, and of course between your greeting and your first paragraph. That's the way you really do your spacing. So this is an example of an email with very poor spacing, and if you got an email like this, you wouldn't want to read it. You really wouldn't. At least I wouldn't want to read it, because the spacing is not right. And the same email, of course, this is another example of poor spacing. Right here, it's an example of there being no spacing between stuff which is proper, and this is an example of spacing which is a little too much and inconsistent. Right here, you have a lot of spacing. Here you have a lot of spacing. Here you have appropriate spacing. Here again, you have a lot of spacing. Right. So this again looks totally shoddy and totally terrible when you're doing it. And now again, this is the example of good spacing. So if you see between your greeting and the first line, you've kept spacing which is just one enter spacing, one line spacing. Between this and this, which is one paragraph, you've kept it, and then each one of these things has spacing between them that makes the same content much, much, much better to read than otherwise, right? So same content can be much more legible, readable if you do spacing right. Okay, you can pause and you can read the email if you want, but this is the broad logic towards it. Now, what's the information you need to know around bold, italics, and when to underline? Use bold to highlight certain words in your email, or draw attention to something, right? And of course, you need to remember that a lot of people almost put their entire email in bold, and that's a very, very bad practice, because if everything is in bold, basically it means nothing is in bold, right? So you need to use bold very selectively where you want people's attention to be brought to. Using underlining is commonly used in writing. However, online it indicates hyperlink sometimes, right? When something is underlined and becomes blue, it can be considered as an hyperlink. So limit the use of underlining and use it for headings only where required, right? So that's the broad logic of where to use it. And we'd probably have an example to show you what a heading means and how you can just use underlining for that. Italics gives a word or phrase emphasis, but they do not necessarily grab a reader's attention. Use italics for emphasis, titles, name of works, or for foreign languages or technical terms, right? So that's the way you would use italics in an email, right? If something is a title, if something is the name of a work, a foreign word, that's when italics are typically used in a email, right? um, and like we mentioned, do not overuse these stylings. An email full of bold, italicized, and underlined text could come across as aggressive, distracting, difficult to read, and confusing, right? So you don't want to overdo it as anything in life. Okay. Now, what's the logic behind numbering and bulleting? So bullets make it easier to structure and organize your message. Now, for those of us who have learned the McKinsey pyramid model, we are actively encouraging you to structure your communication. And if you're going to structure your communication very naturally, you will end up using points and subpoints to it, right? So that is extremely important in your email, and will help both you construct the email in a better way and will also help the receiver consume that information. The other part, which Arunima has already mentioned in point number 4, is that they also make it easier for someone to reply to your bulleted items, right? So when you lay out points, it's easier for the recipient to just reply to each and every point, and then if you want, you can reply back to that. Okay, so bullets make it easier to structure and organize your message. Use bullets to create lists of items, steps, or to make key points. Bullets make your emails easier to read and ensure that the key points are noticed. I mentioned the fourth point already. If you are listing specific steps or want something in a certain order, then use a numbered list instead of bullet points, right? So that's the logic behind when do you use numbering and when you use bullets. Okay, again, look at this point very carefully, because then you may get confused otherwise. If you are listing specific steps or want specific something in a certain order, then using numbered lists instead of bullet points. That's the way to go about it. Yes, Arunima.
I think another important place where numbering comes in handy as opposed to bullet points, if you want
Yeah.
to say that you've attached X number of documents.
Mm.
So that's because no one will count the number of bullet points. You can say that I've
Yeah.
attached the following documents 1, 2, 3. So when
Yeah.
they look at your email, they can
Yeah.
check, okay, are there 3 documents or not?
Correct.
So that's
Absolutely.
another place that numbering can be handy.
Correct. Absolutely. Mm. Now, examples of bullets not used. This is a great example. Just pause this and read this. This is somebody giving a requirement for something, and this is how it's given. Versus the same email being written like this with the entire all the items bulleted, right? And the minute it's bulleted, it's so much easier for the person to read the email. Um, it's so important for him to understand what is required. Arunima, I think this would have been a good place to put numbers instead of bullets, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah, this
Now
would
that
have
I
been a
look
good
at it,
place.
yes.
Yeah, this would have been
Correct.
a good place. But again, here using bullets also work, but numbering would have been easier because the person would have known now exactly what Arunima said, which is this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 things, right? So if you had, he would have been clear that there are 8 things that are required as a part of the AV requirement, right? So this is a classic case in which you could use numbering versus bullets instead, right? Examples of bullets and numbers used here again. Arunima, do you want to share the logic of why you used bullets here and why you've used numbers in a certain place?
Right. So the place where I've used the bullets,
Yeah.
it's again to just show that these are the details around your membership. I believe this was
Yes.
written about the person's membership.
Yes.
However, where we mentioned numbers, which is the
Yeah.
second paragraph, let us
Yeah.
guide you through the how you can make the most. So in a way, there are 8 things you're getting out of this membership. So it's very
Absolutely.
clear that okay, there are 8 different things that I'm going to kind of get out of this,
Get out
which is
of
why
it.
we've used numbering here
Correct.
versus bullet points in the
Bullet
first.
points there, right? So makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. In one email, you have both things, and there's a certain logic for the first one. There's a certain logic for the second one, right? So I think this works well. And even look at the spacing. I think the spacing is done quite well between the points here. You don't have too much of information, so you don't want to do spacing between this. But here, each and every point, there's a lot of information there. So again, good spacing between each one of these things has been done. Here, the headline, which is the starting point of everything, this is a good thing to put in bold, right? Because even if the people don't read the rest of the things, you at least want them to look at these headlines, which have all been put in bold. Yes, Arunima.
Yes, that's what I wanted to draw the attention to. That
Yeah.
again, even in the first 3 points which are bulleted,
Yeah.
when the membership is starting, how much the cost is, that is put in bold as well. So the important information has been highlighted in bold.
Yes. Good. Cool. I think that this is a good example in itself. Okay. Now, what's the logic of email attachments? Okay. Why? What should be sent as an attachment? Okay. So here, the first kind of answer to this is large amounts of text. Any text that goes beyond an A4 size paper should be an attachment, right? So, if as a broad rule, that's a rule that you can keep in mind. Do not use attachments for short notes or messages that can be easily be placed in the body of the email, right? If so something can easily go in the body of the email, you don't want your recipient to take the effort to go and open a different attachment. Any document that you want the recipient to save on their system and circulate internally, right? That's something which is, again, should go as an attachment. That's a good logic for it. And in the email body, mention the attachment, its objective, and what action should be taken, right? So if you're going to give an attachment, please mention it in the email and mention it as early as possible in the email. If you can, highlight important elements of the document in the email, right? So that's something that you can do, of telling them what is important in that document that you attach. You can tell them that in the email itself. Right now, again, these are general rules of what you should do. This doesn't mean that for every attachment you need to do each one of these things, right? So this is just broadly what you keep in mind. Now, sending email attachments, clearly mention the attachment in the email, preferably the first line. Name the attachment appropriately. So this is something which most people don't do, because more often than not, you will just save the attachment on your system if required, and you don't want the attachment to be named something funny or named inappropriately. So as far as possible, name your attachment properly. People's attention don't go towards these things. And do not send attachments that are too heavy. So every time you need to attach something, check whether it's heavy. Typically, I think anything more than 10 MB is considered very, very heavy. In a lot of corporate companies, they would block kind of attachments that are over 10 MB, right? So be very careful of the fact that you're not sending attachments that are above 10, or if I'm not mistaken, 15 MB at max. That should be your way of thinking around it, right? And there are different kind of tools that you can use to send attachments that are heavier than that. Okay. Now this is an example of, again, you can pause it and read it, but here done in the first two, right, as early in the email as possible, where we're saying, dear, please find attached the first draft of the investor awareness script on the dynamic equity funds. So you're putting it as early as possible there. Please find attached the following script. So again, putting it in as early as possible, that actually helps, right? Yeah, so that's the logic behind attachments. Arunima, would you like to share anything else on attachments that you think I have missed out on?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Okay, cool. So I hope there's clarity on that. And of course, if you have any more questions, you're always open to asking your coach those questions and getting his point of view on that as well. Right now, let's look at the third part, which is the ending, the closing. Okay. Exactly like we spoke about, starting your emails on a positive note as far as possible. End emails on a positive note, right? Such as sharing gratitude with the recipient, thanking him, whatever it is that you need to do, right? So these are just a few statements of what you can do, while positive closing statements as a part of your etiquette, right? So you can say, thank you for your help or your time, your assistance, your support. I really appreciate your help, support. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Looking forward to your reply. So these are closing statements with a future focus, right? That you're talking about here. I look forward to hearing from you. Looking forward to your reply. We look forward to a successful working relationship in the future. please advise as necessary, right? So these are future focused closing statements, and we have a few more for you. Statements for showing them you want to help. This is very important. I mentioned this in a previous class as well. Feel free to contact me if you require any further information or clarification. Please let me know if you have any further questions. Should you need any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. So all these things mean the same thing basically, right? It's very important in your emails when you're writing to encourage the person from the other side to get back to you, write back to you if they need any clarifications or further information or have any questions, right? Because when you write an email that way, in a way, you're putting the ball in their court, saying that, listen, I have shared the information that I had to the best of my ability. I've tried to make it precise. I've tried to do all those things. But as with all communication, you could still have certain doubts or questions. And I am more or less openly telling you to get back to me if that is required, right? So these closing statements become very important. So make them polite, make them future, where you're looking forward to the future, and ensure that you show them that you want to help through your closing statements. Now, what should your email signatures do, right? So signatures are a chance for you to make it clear who you are, make it easy for people to reach you, and give people a place to find out more, either about you, about your business, or about something that you're working on, right? So this is the logic about of what email signatures are for. Okay. Now, what to include in those signatures: your first and last name, your job title and department, your secondary contact information, which is your phone number, and your social profile links if required, and your company logo, right? That's what a lot of people do. We typically put our company logo right at the start. A lot of people have it coming there, but here you see a good example of, you end your emails with warm regards or best regards after thanking them, and then you put your name, your job title, your phone number, the company that you work for, your website, and if you have a social media presence, these are other places where people can often check you out or get in touch with you, right? So that's a typical email signature. While each company may have its own kind of diktat on that, but if you don't have a company diktat, this is what you should end up following. Yes, Arunima.
I think one big no when it comes to sort of your ending or your
Yeah.
signature is when you send your email from your phone
Yeah.
and it automatically attaches the signature which is sent from my iPhone or sent from my Samsung
Correct.
phone.
Correct.
It looks terrible when you
Correct.
receive, because and of course, people do access their emails and send out emails using their phones. So that's
Yeah.
not really something that we don't know.
Yeah.
But it just gives a very poor impression when you get that on the receiver's side, because this person has
Yeah.
not taken any effort to kind of format their email
Correct.
properly.
The other thing is, so that it's typically that was introduced by, say, an iPhone or a OnePlus or all these brands to
Hmm.
promote themselves, right? So
Hmm.
you have to understand that they did it smartly to
Right.
promote themselves, saying that, oh, this email is coming off an iPhone or a OnePlus or a Samsung or whatever it is. But you don't want to be advertising for your cell phone company, right? That doesn't make sense. You want to get, whether you're working for a company, whether you're working for you as a freelancer, whether you're an entrepreneur, doesn't matter. What you want to get out is your brand name, in a way, right? Your designation, your brand name. You want to get that out instead of on an iPhone or whatever. And it's very easy for you to kind of go through your settings and remove that, where you
Yeah.
say send from an iPhone, OnePlus, Samsung, whatever it is, right? And this is your broad logic of your email signatures. Another thing that people do is they forget that they have their email signatures where their name is, and then they'll still kind of put best regards Arunima Kamat, and again they'll have their signature that says best regards Arunima Kamat, right? So they'll just write that twice, and that kind of looks a little shoddy as well, right? So if you know that you have a preset signature which has this thing, you don't need to again write it. It shows that you don't have attention to detail there, which, like we've been mentioning, is something which is not good, right? Now, what are some additional email etiquette tips for you? Proofread your email twice before sending it. Okay, please do this. This is something that I preach. I try to practice as much as possible, but every once in a while, where I don't listen to my own advice, invariably there will be some spelling error there, invariably there would be some grammatical error that I've made, and then I'm not following my own advice, and it's sent to somebody and it's not looking good then, right? So avoid doing this. Proofread your emails twice before sending them. And just here, I don't know whether that point comes again, especially for important emails. Try to read the email aloud, right? So you don't need to read it loudly, but at least say the email verbally if it's an important email, because sometimes when you actually read it aloud, you get to know where it's not flowing properly or where you're making an error when you actually read it aloud. So read it twice, and when you're reading it, again, try to read it aloud instead of reading it in silence. That will help you in a big way, right? While doing it, reply to emails within 24 hours as far as possible. Send an interim reply if you need more time to reply to something, right? So that's the basic ground rule for it. And here again, I'm not talking about promotional emails that come to you, or emails where somebody is soliciting business from you in some way. Okay, this doesn't apply to them, but most other emails, this is the rule to follow. This is something that a lot of people do. Do not forward a business email without a comment why you're forwarding it, right? You get so many people doing that. They just forward you, and I'm not talking about fun forwards, right? I'm talking to you about real kind of business forwards that people send across, and they don't put any reason why they're sending it, and they almost leave it up to the receiver to figure out why that email has been forwarded to them, right? Always insert the email ID after you finish typing and checking the email, right? All of us have been a victim to this at some point or the other, where the send button has been pressed before we realized it, and an email went to somebody. Now, of course, a lot of the emails have this feature where they give you a little bit of time to undo it, right? Not all the emails have it, but at least Gmail has it currently, where they give you a little bit of time to undo it, which is good in itself. But if that's not the case, if you're going to write a long email to somebody, just knock off their email ID first, so that it can't go to them in a mistake. And then after you're done typing it, then put the email ID there, right? So yeah, think twice before hitting reply all. For each and everything, you don't need to reply to everyone in an email, right? Because the more the parties involved to it, that often causes more confusion and doesn't bring benefit to anyone. Often, if you just keep replying all and marking irrelevant people in your emails, then they stop taking your email seriously and sometimes won't even open your emails, right? Because they think, oh, this guy just marks everyone for anything, and it's just irrelevant to me when he does this, right? So think twice before you do a reply all. And like we mentioned earlier, never use shorthand in your email. So don't do stuff like, are you free tomorrow? And so don't do this, right? Don't type like this, because again, it looks extremely unprofessional when you do it, right? So these are some just additional tips for you. Now, we have, there weren't any exercises during the program, but we have an exercise for you, which is more like homework, but I would suggest that you do it right away, because these are the exercises that you need to do, and you need to take these exercises into your coaching sessions, where you will then discuss what you have done and show your coach these emails, and he'll probably give you feedback on what you did well, what you didn't do well, how you could have done the entire thing, right? So you have been given a few emails as a part of your learning resources for this session. They'll be given to you in a Word file so that you can just copy that thing and make. Then you're supposed to identify what is wrong with these emails, and you're supposed to rewrite them by implementing your learnings from this session, and also a lot of the previous sessions that we've had, right? We've already discussed that you're supposed to structure your points. You're supposed to write with precision, which is you're supposed to make it specific yet concise, keep it simple. And we've discussed a ton of things here, right? So you're supposed to apply your learnings from this session and all the previous sessions that you have while rectifying those emails, and then you're supposed to show it to your coach during the session. A good thing that you can do is you can write the email and then send that email to yourself, and then when your coaching session starts, you can just open that email that you sent to yourself and then show it to him and have a discussion with him on it. Yeah, and please keep it ready for that. So those are your projects. There are 4 emails, am I right, Arunima?
Yes, there are 4 emails.
Yeah, there are 4 emails, which is your exercise during this coaching session. So do them right away, right now. Don't keep them for later, and so that you can carry this forward to your session. Okay. Now, before we end the session, please make a note of your 3 to 5 takeaways, whatever your takeaways are during this session. I hope you've made copious notes during this thing. As you know the format by now of the workshop, you are supposed to summarize, as one of your exercises is to summarize your learning from this session and also tell your coach what your key takeaways are from this session. So ensure that you do that during this thing. So please take the time out, pause the video here, write your takeaways. Write down 5, but in my opinion, the first thing to do, write down as many takeaways as you can think of first, and then identify what your 3 to 5 top ones are, right? So that's a good way to operate in a way. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Arunima, do you have any questions to end this session before we end it?
No, not. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, cool. So just to end this session, um, like we started the session, we said that the written communication and email communication has become a very important part of corporate business or your work life. People often make their impressions of you depending on how you write and the effort that you take in writing. We've shared already through the initial classes a lot of things that will help you write better. And there's one more class, the class after this, which will tell you specifically on your writing skills, right? So this didn't cover the writing skills. This just covered your etiquette part. We've done certain word on your writing through the precision and the structure thing, but we'll have another class just on how to write better emails for you. That will really help. But the etiquette part is equally important in the subject of business communication. So take these things seriously. And I hope that each one of y'all are implementing the things that y'all are learning through this coaching classes, right? Because in the end, I keep sharing this with you, that the don't make it a knowledge action gap where you learned a lot of things, but you aren't in a very conscious, in a very aware way. You're not implementing your learnings in your day-to-day life, right? And if you don't consciously implement it in your day-to-day life, you're not going to see the benefits of this program. And I keep going back and telling people that a lot of us, when we want to improve our communication, also want to improve our fluency. And one of the best ways to improve your overall fluency and command while speaking is by doing the exercises mentioned in the communication gym. Those things are extremely important, and I hope that each one of y'all are doing it. If you actually want to get better at speaking, at the end of 3 months, you will see amazing results through all the things that you're going to learn through this if you implement them, but especially by doing the communication gym, because we have almost 10 to 12 years of experience of training in this subject. If you've seen our website, that we train the who's who on subjects of soft skills and behavior, and our 10 years of experience tell us that if you want to improve your speaking, if you want to improve your communication, it takes that hard work. People that have done it have got so much better, and people that kept looking for lazy escape routes never got better, because they always wanted a shortcut. They said, oh, no, 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 I don't want to read aloud every day, that's too tough. And what's tough about it, right? There's nothing tough about it. It just requires a certain amount of discipline. So in a disciplined manner, start implementing your takeaways in your day-to-day life. In a disciplined manner, please do the exercises that are required. In a disciplined manner, do the communication gym exercises. The last suggestion before I sign off is, Arunima, as a part of each one of these classes, we have given people a summary sheet, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, that's
Right,
right.
we've given them a summary sheet. So a good practice, ladies and gentlemen, to keep in mind is, go through all the summary sheets. So if you're on your sixth, whatever, your fourth, fifth, sixth coaching session, you're paying money for this thing, right? You're paying money, and you want to make your money's worth from this session. please go through the summary sheets of all your classes starting from the first class that you had, because that you need to keep reminding your brain of the things that you've learned, exactly like we would tell our kids. For example, they may have learned, they may have been in a certain class 3 months back, but if your child tells you that, okay, today I have an exam but I don't need a reminder of what I learned, you would find that pretty strange, right, if they said something like that. But we do exactly that. We don't remind ourselves of our learning. So you need to keep going back, looking at those summary sheets that are there, looking at those learnings, and constantly keeping them top of mind, right? That's what you need to do. And the beauty about a topic like communication skills is you have literally day and night to practice them in some form or the other, right? Because you're communicating all the time in some setting. So you have the scope, you have the opportunity to practice them. But if you're not going to keep these things top of mind, then your communication is never going to get better. And I'll feel really bad with that, right? Where we're getting great feedback for all these sessions that we're doing, and I'm glad that you're enjoying this session. We got a few messages, and one message specifically which we got from someone where they said that, what, we actually applied the learnings of this thing, and I in one of my interactions with my boss, and I saw a fantastic result that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, right? So the people that are taking this thing seriously are already seeing the returns even after one or two classes. They're like, I'm applying it, I'm seeing it. For those of you all not applying it, another waste of another session, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, my humble request to you is please don't do that, right? Okay. Thank you very much. I will see you for the next class, and hope you're having a great time. Thank you. Bye.